I view the MBTI the same way I view astrology. Fun, but potentially trouble if taken too seriously. Fine for fun, fine as a tool, not fine as a method of professional financial decision making, not fine as like a finalistic determination of somebody's character. You get it. I like tarot because I think it can function as a tool regardless of spiritual belief to help identify thoughts, feelings, things that you already knew but weren't really thinking about. Disclaimer though, I'm not a psychologist and I could be lying for all you know. The MBTI is something of a Franken test that has had new body parts sewn on over the years. The model was initially based on Carl Jung's work on personality, and as time progressed, things like the turbulent/assertive categorization and cognitive functions and a bunch of other stuff have kind of been added or had their roles expanded. I am of the opinion that the MBTI status is a Franken test, as well as the lack of empirical data, issues with reproducibility, and constant internal dissent within the community over how anything works leads me to treat it with a fair dose of skepticism, and by that I mean I don't really believe in it at all. I don't think a lack of scientific basis makes it reprehensible. It just means you should be very measured in your application of it. It's pop psychology, much like love languages or the stages of grief. Even as the idea or the terminology might be interesting, buying into it too seriously can lead to an overly narrow view of the human mind. In fact, basically every personality test ever invented is flawed to the point of being nonsense. Cult of Personality Testing by Annie Murphy Paul is a very good book on the subject. It covers a lot of different tests and their origins, including the MBTI, as well as the inaccuracy of most of these tests, which we kind of know now, but like for a while it was kind of dicey. There is no personality test that truly works or produces an image of someone that is any more nuanced than like a very simple passing overview, and this includes the big five, despite it being taken more seriously than the MBTI and most other personality tests. That one's generally regarded as the most inoffensive and like fine-ish in psychology, but it is still like a very vague test. Like it gives you a very surface level first impression of a person that you could basically assess from just talking to them for like 20 minutes. So it's less vibe-based than the MBTI for sure. It's not that it's like strictly wrong or incorrect, it's just that it can offer a very simplistic and surface level observation of someone's personality. And some of the creators of that test have claimed that personality is fixed and not situation dependent, which is like a wildly unsubstantiated claim at best. In general, using dichotomies in personality testing makes it basically impossible to account for situational differences and how people will adapt in favor of trying to make a model of how someone acts 100% of the time, which, like, if you've ever been outside before, you might be familiar with the fact that that's not how the world works. These guys also, like, really want to sell this test to you. Like, do you want to buy their tests? Do you want to force your employees to take it? Do you want to administer this test at the office weekend team building retreat? However, that is not what we're here to discuss today. I would like to discuss why people latch on to particular personality types from the MBTI so much more than others, because of the status they signify and the things that they mean. So think of this video more as a thought experiment on microcosms of status, sprinkled with critique of personality testing. And again, if it's just for fun, I think it's fine. If you're just taking the test for fun, you're fine. I'm not trying to rain on your parade. I'm trying to rain on this, like, other different separate parade. Your parade is fine. Also, we're going to talk about status pretty neutrally as just like a human desire to be liked and well regarded, and not necessarily as a negative thing during the course of this video also. So the first French man I'm going to bring up to you is Saussure and his concept of a signifier and a signified, which is like a pretty famous baseline concept in linguistics and semiotics and stuff. So it's a very popular thing. But basically the signifier is the symbol or the sound image, and the signified is the meaning. I'll put up his like tree chart for you. And it basically just means that like we have a word for a thing, and when you hear the word you think of the thing because that's what is signified to you, the signifier and the signified. But the connection is usually arbitrary, right? Like there's no reason it has to be that word. There's no reason a tree has to be like TREE. Like we just chose that, and it usually evolves kind of organically, linguistically, but there are simpler signifiers like tree, and there are more complex ones, sometimes constructed of several signifiers at once to denote complex signified. And our working definition of status for this video is just esteem, or how highly regarded you are in a group or in society relative to others. And a status signifier is just a way to externally display status to other people, so you gain higher status. And my example for you today is Kendall Jenner's house tour, where she says she got these books herself.
A lot of the books in the house I've personally gone out to buy.
At the antique store or whatever, as if getting books yourself in person at the store because you liked them is not the single most normal way to obtain books ever. It sounds kind of ridiculous, right? But in the context of entertainment industry celebrity culture house tours, where a large amount of her peers have coffee table books selected for them by interior designers and house curators that they've never cracked open ever, having books in your house that are actually your books that you've read is a status signifier, because it signifies intelligence or education or free time or whatever. And I would speculate the reason she said this is because, much like that infamous bowl of limes,
I love limes. I like to present them like this in my house.
Things in celebrities' houses are often selected for them. Having books in the house isn't a strong signifier in celebrity culture because that's just basic interior design. Having books in the house that you've selected and read is a signifier of status and a differentiator. She even says most of the books, which means one or two might be styling.
Oh, most of the books on this table have been found locally.
But it was important to her that the audience knew that at least some were her own books. And books are an education signifier and an intelligence signifier, but its meaning is changed by the environment, so she has to specify how she obtained them in order for it to retain the meaning that she wants. So the secondary important concept from this example is that status is relative to community and social group and environment. So the next question is, why do people gravitate towards personality tests like the MBTI so much? There's been kind of an MBTI renaissance in the internet era, with people once again getting into it, even though it's kind of public knowledge that it's not a scientifically validated test at all. A lot of people will either be like, I don't care, or flat out argue. So people really like this test. You know, there's a lot of arguments about it. And there's also sometimes the argument that comes up that the MBTI is like, oh, well, it's based on the work of Carl Jung, and Carl Jung was a real psychologist, even if Myers and Briggs weren't. Which Carl Jung was a psychologist in a time when psychologists functioned like ancient Greek philosophers in the sense that they would just say things. Jung had faults in his work too, and often didn't have concrete evidence for the things he proposed. Just because an important man was involved does not make it more legit. He was wrong too, sometimes. On the whole, I quite like Carl Jung. I get it. He was absolutely spitting a lot of the time. He had a very humanistic and holistic approach to human psychology that I respect. He also had no data. Actually basically none ever. And he also got kind of mystical with it sometimes. So, literal vibe science guy. He himself never tried to make deterministic personality tests. He was pretty distantly polite about the Myers-Briggs test. And he expressed as much because he was still alive when they made that. And they sent him letters about it a few times, Briggs and Myers. Each, I think on separate occasions, exchanged letters with him. And he was kind of oh, that's nice. He was really not super into it. So I think calling it the Jung typology test, the way that some people do, is kind of dishonest. Because it makes it sound like he worked hand in hand with them to make the test, and he did not. Also, the other issue is that self-reporting can be wildly inaccurate. Even if you think you're being super objective and unbiased, you have an existing perception of yourself and you will answer according to it, irrespective of its accuracy. But this veneer of science and legitimacy paired with a universally flattering description is exactly what's so appealing in the first place. Plus, the internet has made these kind of very lengthy tests that previously required a pen and a paper and a person to review and compile and interpret results into very quick, accessible experiences with immediate results and career recommendations. My favorite one was the website I went to that suggested career paths such as spy and assassin, just like hitman jobs. I don't know. Humans love a category for sure. And there is an element of self-soothing to slot neatly into a box and a personality type. It can explain and externalize the cause and blame for traits and flaws. The thought process of, oh, I'm an IQRP or whatever, and that's why I'm like that, instead of the more extensive and laborious process of inward reflection. That can be appealing. It is comforting to be able to point to something as the capital C cause and simplify it. There's also quite a community involved. Aside from all of that, like, it's fun. It's like a half-decent icebreaker or a creative writing tool or just a fun category or a way to pass time. And it is the most fandom-heavy of the personality tests. There's an active and enthusiastic community and a supply of merch. So next we're going to look at some of the forums and the posting surrounding MBTI as a whole and particular MBTI types. So we're going to look mostly at the casual colloquial community posting about the MBTI because it's been out of vogue for a while in real life, sort of. There's still people who get paid like six figures to go to people's workplaces and make them take the test and then like wildly mischaracterize everyone in the room for the sake of team building. It's probably happening as we speak, actually. We'll get into the intersection with business and white collar jobs in a minute. But there are 4 different categories, and by far the most vocal and insistent and like omnipresent categories are the NF categories and the NT categories. They have, as far as I can tell, the most posts across social media. And according to some of the data from the testing sites, these 2 categories, and especially some of the types within them, are the most rare. INTJ and INFJ are allegedly the rarest alongside ENTJ, I believe, but have some of the biggest forums. I would argue that the reason for this participation is that these types are status signifiers. You often see comments a lot more active in NT and NF type posts, while the more mundane or common types are quieter. And a part of the desire to engage stems from feeling as though a particular type is a status boost. INFJ is the rarest by most accounts, but has the most shares on 16 personalities. There's some beef about how legitimate that site is. There's some internal dissent in the community. Probably the single most common, single largest free testing site. INFJ is the rarest type by most accounts, but has the most shares on 16 personalities and some of the largest forums, compared to types like ISFJ or ISTJ, which are some of the most common, allegedly. Even if it's only engagement, these numbers are kind of crazy. Like, INFJ and INTJ specifically have disproportionately large claiming and communities relative to their hypothetical actual size based on the statistics from the testing websites. Like, how are there over 440,000 shares on the INFJ page and only 76,000 on ISTJ, when ISTJ describes roughly 10 times as many people? The answer is partially rooted in status and desirability. INFJ is rare, it's high status, it's a little bit aggrandized, and so people are more likely to claim it and share it to other people. It's actually despite being the rarest type, it is the single most claimed on that website, I believe. Like, it is the single most shared. And a lot of the casual posting about MBTI is very much like MBTI type as insert thing here, whether that's colors, hobbies, careers, food, perfumes, fashion, other signifiers, right? Something interesting to me about the way that they're posted about is that it is kind of functionally identical to the way people post about astrology, both aesthetically and in formatting. The associations with food, fashion, literature, media consumption, and other outward signifiers to others. From the more artsy fruit and novels posting to the more run-of-the-mill short-form videos listing characters with X signifier, whether that's their MBTI or their star sign, the function of these posts and of these signifiers, the category name, I suppose, is to function as shorthand for a more expansive but somewhat coherent group of other signifiers. So like Leo as a star sign has these associations with orange, yellow, citrus, summer, bright, sweet, eye-catching, which signifies more of an outgoing personality, vitality, extroversion, warmth, right? Versus the Scorpio posting is very like burgundy, black, purple, red meat, red wine, chocolate, bold makeup, witchcraft, high contrast, very dark colors. And it has this signified of being more intense and sultry and hedonistic and almost supernatural. There's a lot of posting like this, and there's a lot of very similar styles of posting. There's more for astrology because astrology is more popular, and also people just are more fun about astrology. Sorry to the MBTI community. I'm not saying you guys aren't fun. I just mean like people who do astrology stuff tend to have a greater sense of whimsy. It doesn't take itself as seriously. Let's talk four-letter code as status signifier now. The 4 dichotomies of the MBTI are introversion, extroversion, which I'm sure you already know, sensing versus intuitive, which is like being in tune with the moment in your physical surroundings versus being more like cerebral and big picture. And then there's thinking versus feeling, which I'm sure you can also figure out, and judging versus perceiving, which is, are you spontaneous or planned? There's also the turbulent versus assertive secret 5th dichotomy that we ignore and basically everyone else ignores, and none of it matters to the identity signaling, so we're just not going to talk about it. There's also this concept of cognitive functions that people bring up a lot, which is like complicated as hell and like messy and confusing, and we're not talking about that either because it doesn't actually impact any of the signaling. So each 4-letter code functions as complex signifier that implies a wide range of traits and dispositions. The MBTI itself then creates like a hyperreal system under which everyone is neatly categorized by a 4-letter code signifier with an extensive signified that can be expanded almost endlessly depending on how many Barnum statements you have up your sleeve. It's a hyperreal construction of personality in that it takes signifiers of identity, status, and personality and reconstructs them in a controlled system of exaggerated versions of reality and personality that makes anything less exaggerated feel more real. One addendum on treating 2 personality traits as a dichotomy or 2 ends of the same spectrum. I fundamentally take issue with the idea that thinking and feeling are specifically 2 ends of the same spectrum. I think they are 2 separate parallel traits. Some people are stupid and apathetic. I don't think logic is the opposite of emotion. I think they are each ways of interfacing with the world that inform each other. What constitutes logic is subjective based on how you perceive the world and what you value. Logic is a tool, emotion is an experience. What you see as rational behavior is often calm, and calm is an emotion. Logic is a tool in service of a goal or an outcome, but what the desired outcome is determined by your emotions and your values. When you have more of one, you don't necessarily definitionally have less of the other. The spectrum implies a proportionality to the coexistence, which I dislike. And I think a lot of these other traits too, basically every other trait, is extremely context dependent rather than pure personality fixed all the time. I'm going too slowly. My camera can only record in 29-minute takes. 29 minutes. 29 minutes is all I can spare to play with you. Certain types carry status because of their associations, but also because of their perceived exclusivity and the fact that personality cannot be easily purchased or learned or reproduced, hypothetically. Like other status signifiers, which, realistically, personality has a fair bit of plasticity, just like the brain, and can absolutely change dramatically over the course of your life. But for the most part, personality is viewed as something you simply are instead of something you obtain. And the 16 types, like we said before, are frequently divided into 4 categories of 4. The analysts, the diplomats, the sentinels, and the explorers. Sometimes the sentinels are called the guardians, sometimes the explorers are called like adventurers or something. There's color coding and kind of a status hierarchy. Analysts are often seen as the highest status or the rarest or the most exclusive. That's NT types and they're purple. And sentinels or guardians tend to be at the bottom. They're blue and they're SJ category, and they are home to I think most of all of the most common types. Diplomat's and explorer kind of in the middle, although I'd argue diplomat has kind of an edge. The N, or intuitive typing, is significantly more rare than S, or sensing, with like a 75-25, 70-30 split, depending on who you ask. And so scarcity equals exclusivity equals status, right? It's rare, so it's worth more now, hypothetically, as we've established. Every other trait is split pretty 50-50 in terms of how often it shows up. As we've established so far, N-types have significantly more posted content, and there's more people who enthusiastically associate with and claim these types, despite them being the minority. Specifically, the analyst types and INFJ are very popular. INFP, ENFP are around, but second place, and then nobody ever talks about ENFJ for some reason. I don't know what's up with that. There's a much greater volume of posting around personality types with the N classification than the pretty significant minority would suggest. Part of this, alongside the exclusivity factor, is that the intuitive trait is typed more as, or described more as, kind of an intelligence signifier. It is a shorthand for being cerebral, and then combining that with T usually gets you this like genius narrative. So next up, classism, status, and economics. Who's ready to have some fun? NTs, or analysts, are the most associated with educated, high-paying, high-status jobs. It is tied up in perceptions of wealth, elitism, and education. Remember how the MBTI is often used in workplaces or job interviews. Its success as a testing method in pop culture is inseparable from its usage as a framework for being a money-making predictor for corporations. It has a very white-collar business association. Analysts are more valued in this context, and the test is more administered in office environments as opposed to like a fast food joint, but you never know what they're going to do these days, really. But a lot of corporate workplaces will do like leadership workshops and make their employees take the test to maximize efficiency and team build, which is kind of just an evolution of people with corporate desk jobs like inventing things to do. In a society like America that is very money and work focused, it affords higher status to corporate jobs, and the higher earning, higher efficiency associations are higher status. This book, on page 128, Murphy says, quote, "Original and independent-minded as she was, Isabel Myers managed to create a personality test that conforms perfectly to this 21st century workplace. The indicator's unfailingly positive tone blends seamlessly with the language of corporate political correctness and with our society's emphasis on promoting self-esteem." Every time you see a free version of this test and there are like paywalled features, remember that this is like a multi-hundreds of $million industry. To abruptly bring up a second French guy in this video, Pierre Bourdieu, and his writing on status, which has been heavily referenced, even though it is like very specifically about 1960s France. He talks about how we pick signifiers based on what group we want to be associated with and high status within, and then distance ourselves from signifiers of groups we do not wish to be associated with. So if intelligent, well-educated, high-performing, you're just what this company needs, you're a total business leader, I'm taking you under my wing, is what we're aiming for. NT and NTJ types specifically, because those are seen as organized, are higher status and may be claimed more, or test answers might skew in that direction, as sometimes people will self-report according to what they think of as valuable and aspirational, as opposed to a very realistic, detached view of themselves. Like, for example, somebody who is very emotional and is very governed by that, answering like 50-50 in the middle on a question that's like, I use logic to make decisions, because they value using logic, but they know that they don't always, so they answer in the middle, even though that's not actually true to how they behave. I think also with this trait specifically, people sometimes just have like a very skewed self-perception. It's very common for people to think that they're a lot more logical than they actually are. Everybody thinks they're a lot more rational than, or maybe not a lot. Everyone thinks they're a little more rational than they are. It's sort of how like 80% of people will rate themselves as above average drivers, even though that like can't possibly be true. I think most people would consider themselves average or above average rationality, even though that also can't possibly be true. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. But your personality type is a shorthand of also communicating values and taste. There are lots of mood boards showing exactly what an INTJ, ENTP, INTP, ENTJ, PB and J is pictured to like. These types specifically are associated with the professional class and a level of economic success. There's expensive makeup, fancy food, highbrow art and media tastes, and congregated together, these are clearly meant to signify a level of status. We're taking a gender interlude now, which is kind of an awkward place to put this, but that's the channel you're on, so it's gender time. Gender socialization affects behavior and adapted personality traits. It is extraordinarily common for people to intentionally alter their behavior and perform a different personality than what comes naturally to them to meet a certain expectation or perception of gender. It is equally likely for someone to answer according to gendered expectations. Women are expected to be more social, emotional, and organized, and so many will have a self-perception, true or not, skewing in that direction. Men are expected to be more stoic, rational, and reckless, which is kind of a contradiction, but that's still a thing. It's not really an accident that women are usually, sometimes, almost a lot, generally speaking, more likely to test as feelers, and men are more likely to test as thinkers, because that's how they're expected to act. That's how a lot of people are very, very strongly encouraged to behave, even if it's not who they would be left to their own devices. Women similarly tend to have higher agreeableness scores on the Big Five, not because women are inherently nice, but because there are greater social consequences for women if they aren't. So they display agreeable behaviors more often. We have sort of a chicken and the egg problem with gender and personality testing, wherein gender absolutely does impact personality development, but personality testing often makes this look inherent and not environmental, especially prevalent with a lot of these tests because the creators, it is in their financial interest that you believe personality is fixed. Personality traits are related to gender performance, and gender performance is reactive to environment. See my previous work on that. So that means that things are changing situationally based on several intersecting factors. Even in less overtly patriarchal but still heteronormative environments, this is still present, sometimes even more prominent because performance may be exaggerated to maintain a relational gender performance gap. It's also worth noting that stereotypically masculine or male-associated things are typically higher status as well than things with a feminine connotation. This extends to personality types and especially the analyst category, which has professional and academic associations aesthetically, which are environments in which obvious attempts at feminine performance are looked down upon as low status aesthetically because it is seen as a lack of status attachment, which is the principle of acting casual about something high status and therefore making it even higher status by like not caring and being super nonchalant and cool about it. Yay. A full face of makeup or a bright pink skirt might be derided as impractical or try hard. Femininity in these spaces is often expected to follow a model of status detachment, as in coming across as quote-unquote naturally feminine without even trying, which is a myth. It's the myth of the effortless femininity. No natural, no makeup, hair done, but in like an understated way and like usually straight, which has a lot of other connotations too. Thin. Academia is a little obsessed with thinness and by extension the romanticization of not eating or sleeping enough. There's this whole like academic who's detached from the needs of the flesh and is therefore more cerebral for it kind of thing, which is like a little ridiculous, but like it definitely exists. And you have a lot of those like her diet, her literature images. I mean, some of them are very funny. Like if your girl likes to eat whole red onions, she also reads Dostoevsky. Right, okay. But basically a lot of these spaces want this effortless myth of the no makeup, the thin, the understated demure outfit while still keeping up with everyone else intellectually. Effortlessly beautiful, effortlessly thin, effortlessly composed and accommodating. This is all gender performance, infused with the plausible deniability of status detachment. It is often a higher status to perform gender according to these standards as a result. Excess of feminine performance is low status, but a lack of feminine performance is also low status. The gender tightrope strikes again. Status is also related to the implied virtue of gender compliance that we've discussed here before. It is higher status to be gender conforming. and you were perceived as to be a better person. So that sucks. A lot of this plays into the way women get made fun of for getting plastic surgeries or caring too much about their appearance or doing like too many other alterations. Too many. It violates the principle of status detachment. They are demonstrating that they care too much about their appearance. It is high status to be beautiful. It is low status to care about being beautiful. That's how they get you. I keep losing my place because I'm evil and I didn't put any line breaks in my notes. What is my problem? Men are also frequently derided for visibly caring too much or trying too hard with appearance also, which is the lack of status attachment combined with queerphobia and misogyny, i.e., you're acting like a woman, that's gay. What do you know about acting like a woman? 8 p.m., roast dinner. Female pervert grocery haul. I'm obsessed with these things. Identity building from status signifying is similar to gender performance in that it is a stylized repetition of acts. Status signaling and gender performance help to construct identity and therefore personality, and both can change drastically over time based on environment. As a person gravitates towards presentation and signaling beneficial in a new environment, their identity shifts. So too does their personality. Which is literally just the plot of The Devil Wears Prada. The higher status someone is, the greater norm breaking or nonconformity is allowed or even celebrated, like a very famous musician getting away with a flamboyant and garish outfit that would be uncool on someone else. This principle extends to gender nonconformity. The wealthier, more successful, more beautiful, more high status someone is, the greater the allowance is to be gender nonconforming. So, with all of that said, reminder for the audience that it's your life and you should present gender however you want to do that and however is fulfilling to you. A lot of behaviors labeled as girly or gay are actually great for your mental health, which is the truth bomb. Bunny slippers and bubble baths and buying a bouquet for yourself at the farmer's market. A massive amount of pro-mental health behavior actually is stereotyped as feminine, which leads to a lot of men being like more unwilling to participate because it's like an identity thing now. It's a gender identity thing. And so their mental health is worse as a result because we have coded all of the pro-mental health behaviors and all of the self-care behaviors as feminine. So the status of the INTJ within the analyst category as the most rare is our next segue. This type is possibly the most publicly claimed and sought after. The NT category as a whole is high status, but some other specific types like the INFJ also seem to be fairly coveted. Actually, you could absolutely make the argument the INFJ is higher status, but the identity markers of the INTJ are more codified and consistent aesthetically, so that makes it easier for the purposes of analysis. It's got a very like mastermind narrative because it's the introverted, intuitive thinking, judging, so you're like cerebral and quiet but very structured, and that's, means that you're good at chess or something. The roster, depending on who you ask, are Bruce Wayne, the Terminator, JFK, Hannibal Lecter, Jane Austen. I'll stop here. Its alleged rarity and practical inaccessibility make it hypothetically invulnerable to aura decay, but practically it is still kind of affected. Personality is generally adaptable and malleable, but systems and tests make it feel more immutable. Like we said, rare plus immutable means resistant to aura decay. And aura decay, in this context, is based on aura as a concept as defined by Walter Benjamin, which is the power in time and space that an artwork has. And then decay of the aura is then a result of mass production and dilution of the art's need to exist in a singular time and space, and it is now easily accessible. He's originally talking about aura in relation to like paintings and such art objects. Our definition of aura decay today will be different. Walter Benjamin kind of had it out for printmaking and film a little bit, and I kind of disagree with that. I don't think mass production dilutes the aura of books or movies. Books specifically, and he beefs more with lithography than the printing press itself, which is very funny because he had to print the essay. That is besides the point for our purposes today. His concept of aura and aura decay is not dissimilar to what W. David Marx says about status signifiers in the book Status and Culture, in which status signifiers lose power when adapted by the contemporary masses. So we are using Walter Benjamin's language to articulate signifier aura decay, but just note and remember that that's not the original meaning of the word, and it is an interpretation of it in a new context. Essentially, status signifiers experience aura decay as they are widely adopted or lose exclusivity. So reproduction leads to a decrease in aura, and mass adoption leads to a decrease in status. It's cultural capital versus ubiquity. This is probably the most core principle of status theory, or whatever you want to call it. Mass production and ease of consumption are the enemies of exclusivity and therefore status. Status is composed of conventions, and the MBTI is a pre-made convention set. Things go down in status when the masses adopt them, whoever the masses may be. Personality types are hypothetically difficult to do this with, but lying does exist. And regardless of the numbers, the lore and perception remain the same. It's rare, and as long as the stats on the websites and the myths persist, so does exclusivity. Aura decay stems from mass production, and you can't exactly mass produce a personality, but you can mass produce the Myers-Briggs itself. These mass-produced replications play something of a game of telephone with the test itself, iterating slightly differently and shifting in meaning as it goes. Walter Benjamin would perhaps argue that this mutability contributes to a greater aura decay. A major part of status signaling is status detachment too, like we established earlier, acting indifferent or nonchalant about something high status. MBTI has a layer of built-in detachment because it is a result given to you by a test. So it becomes, oh, that's just what I am, that's just what my result is. The INTJ is associated with discernment, and discernment is associated with taste is associated with class, and class is associated with exclusivity, and exclusivity is status. You emulate more than just the product shown because it is not strictly consumption, but construction of identity. So beyond what lipstick you buy, it turns into what your habits and diet and other disparate lifestyle choices are. The practicality and quality angle to taste is a historically old money signaling technique that the rational streak of the analyst category broadly imitates in much of the aesthetics. A reliable, authentic, 100% wool Irish fisherman's sweater over a visibly designer coat. Still not a cheap article of clothing, but maintains status detachment by giving a plausible deniability that it was purchased solely for its quality and not what it represents. But much of this academic or wealthy aesthetic association and signaling is also distinctly East Coast American / Western European visually, so it is concerned with a very Eurocentric perception of wealth, status, and academia. The Myers-Briggs and the online posting and community around it serve as almost a standalone status ecosystem with clear categories and associations. It's much more structured than the broader culture and much more isolated, since MBTI doesn't have any real status or legitimacy outside of its online communities. Signifiers and signified and signs and the whole system usually come about organically and evolve over time linguistically, but the MBTI is a set of signs presented first and the associations and signified growing and mutating after. A lot of it is framed as a path to self-actualization instead of a shortcut to identity. But you know, I like tarot, I like astrology, I like a silly little personality test as much as the next person, but the most serious takeaway I have for you is that a lot of these tests are not as scientific. Yep, that's right. A lot of these tests are not as scientifical as they present themselves to be. A lot of people already know this, but a lot of people still bring these tests into schools and workplaces to be used in limiting and detrimental ways, especially when introduced to young children as predictors of success, or as a sort of ranking system that can reinforce existing racist and sexist viewpoints. I talk mainly about how this test intersects with status and gender, but I would like to close out by reading you some of my favorite quotes from the Cult of Personality Testing. 163 from one Thomas Oakland and his, we'll say, original-ish work. Not really. Thomas Oakland made the student styles questionnaire, which is deadass like a right-click thesaurus of the Myers-Briggs and then like given to children, so it's still topical for this video. Asked if children are growing and changing all the time, Thomas Oakland retorts, nope, these are biologically based qualities. They are there from the beginning. Stereotypes of gender as well as race are reinforced by this personality test starting as early as age 8. Female students are more likely than their male counterparts to score as feelers in order to be more effective in life Oakland says that girls who are labeled thinkers need to acquire a respect for harmony and for relying on and developing their feeling capacities and displaying other feminine qualities. And as Murphy Paul very aptly points out, the apparently benign personality testing of children provides a convenient cover for the less appealing agendas of adults. Don't give personality tests to small children. I think that's a bad idea. This sort of like legitimizing a bigoted or biased agenda using this like veneer of pseudoscience is also something that comes up in my annotated copy of the Feminine Mystique that I just so happen to have here. When discussing marriage courses that existed in colleges in the 60s, these pseudoscientific marriage courses give what is often no more than popular opinion the appearance of scientific law. The opinion may be currently fashionable or already outdated in psychiatric circles, but is often merely a prejudice buttressed by psychological or sociological jargon and well-chosen statistics to give the appearance of unquestionable scientific truth. And that was used in marriage courses to try and, like, oppress women and convince them to behave in, like, extremely limited ways. And that's a very similar principle to what goes on sometimes with personality testing, sometimes still with women. That thinking-feeling dichotomy is really, I think it's trouble. The guy who made the 16PF, when talking about why he chose to be a psychologist at the time, the quote that he gives, which I'll show to you here, kind of reveals a desire to be both socially important and do humanities adjacent work that solves society, but still have the legitimacy and high status of being in a scientific field. And this is what we've talked about before in this video and others about 20th century psychologists being functionally philosophers who wanted the legitimacy of a STEM field, and how that can sometimes potentially be harmful when they're wrong about things. It all comes back down to status. This guy was crazy. Cattle, whatever his name was. I don't care about getting his name right, because he went on to propose some like dystopian sci-fi supervillain levels of eugenics. He tried to start a eugenics religion called Beyondism, which is a really funny thing to call your religion. But the other two main takeaways, and I recommend reading this book yourself, it's quite good, is that on page 185, which I will also put up for you, is that Walter Mischel, in his authoring of Personality and Assessment, is quoted pointing out how people respond to roles placed on them and situations, and that most testing does not account for, like, any form of context or any situation or any social dynamic. I agree with him, and a lot of what I say in this video is very reflective of that. But, you know, you act in ways depending on things in situations. You are not going to be 100% a certain way 100% of the time. And long story short, these tests serve institutions. They serve companies that make profit, and they serve a very corporate workplace kind of system. As the job market gets the way that it is, some of the testing that has fallen out of fashion in the past has wormed its way back into the interview process and workplaces. Someone I know had a guy get paid 2 separate times to come to the office to administer the MBTI and then strategize based on employee results. He was reportedly very insufferable. Another friend of mine applied to be a cashier at a gas station 20 minutes outside of town, and they made her take like a 2-hour personality test to only then not offer so much as an interview. Personality tests are institutional tools used by institutional tools to maximize efficiency and stratify people into ranks. They're still allowed in a lot of hiring processes and workplaces, and there aren't many employee protections in place, if any, in some places, to ensure a person's right to refuse. So I guess my advice is, if you like this kind of stuff, give tarot a try. It's pretty similar and usually less insidious and pigeonholes you a little less. Just remember the grain of salt. The grain of salt is your friend.